Okay, so today we're going to go over the notes, the pre-reading notes for The Most Dangerous Game. You should fill out your guided notes sheet as we go through these, so that is here. The front page is the literary devices that we're going to talk about, and then the back page is the vocabulary list. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is conflict. So there are two main types of conflict, external and internal. And external conflict takes place outside of yourself. So it's you or the character versus someone outside of themselves. Internal conflict, on the other hand, takes place inside of the body or the mind of your character. So this is more like an internal struggle, personal struggle that someone has to overcome, whereas this is external is more like, someone or something is working against the main character. So there are three types of external conflict. The first one is man versus man. And this is the most straightforward type of conflict. It's your protagonist or your main character directly against another character with apparently opposing aims. So your character wants something different than the antagonist, who is the person who is a person who's working against them. So you see some examples. These look just kind of like fights, basically, right? So man versus man can also be like a group of men versus a group of men or women, right? We say man versus man, but we don't mean only men. We mean, anyone. Person versus person would be another way to say this. But if you look at a story, like if you've ever seen West Side Story, or I'm trying to think of some other examples. In Romeo and Juliet, we'll definitely see this, where you kind of have like a group of people versus a group of people. So like in West Side Story, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, but there's the Jets and the Sharks, right? And they don't like each other. So that would still be man versus man, even though it's a group of people and another group of people. The next one is man versus nature. So this is a type of conflict where the story's main character or characters are fighting against some kind of a natural force. So it could be a flood, it could be an animal, it could be a disease. So basically anything that isn't human goes into the man versus nature category. So if like a character in a story is being haunted, that would still be man versus nature, because it's not it's like supernatural, or like when you think of zombie movies, or what's another example? Like vampires and things like that. So those would all be man versus nature, because they're sort of like a not really human, supernatural type of thing that falls under man versus nature. So we see this a lot with like disaster movies, apocalypse movies. This could also be like, I always think of The Sandlot, where there's the really mean dog, right? So that would be man versus nature. The next one is man versus society. And so this is where your protagonist or your main character is battling something in the government or the culture that is unjust. So something that they feel is, corrupted or not right. Okay. So a lot of times I think of the Hunger Games movies, where Katniss is, standing up to the government and the president to protest, sort of the way that the districts are being treated. A lot of dystopian novels and stories have this type of conflict where our main character is, battling against something that the government has put into place. And then internal conflict is just called man versus self. And again, this could be person versus self. Some literary conflicts take the form of a character struggling to overcome fear, addiction, emotional damage, or some other personal issue. So these would be stories where you have someone who has to overcome something in their own life. So maybe they are, battling a mental health issue, or like it says here, an addiction, something like that, where they are having to overcome, but it's something within themselves. Maybe they need to find the courage to go through with something, or to, achieve their goals. So those are the basic types of conflict. We're going to do a little comprehension check here. So just to yourself, you can answer what type of conflict this would be. Person versus what? Okay, hopefully you came to the conclusion that this would be person versus nature, because we have this would be our character here. This is clearly a flooded town, right? We've got the top of a house here completely underwater. And it also looks like some snow going on maybe, or maybe this is ashes. I'm not really sure what's happening, but definitely a natural disaster here. All right, the next one. What type of conflict would this be? Person versus what? Okay, hopefully you have thought to yourself that this is person versus person. So we have two people that are arguing with each other. So this is very clearly that first type of external conflict. Here's another one. This one's kind of funny. So this would be a person versus nature, right? You have a person, it looks like they were trying to take a photograph and a kangaroo attacked them. So this would definitely be an example of person versus nature. This one, you have a woman, it looks like standing, holding a flower in front of a bunch of armed military. So this would be a good example of person versus society, because you can see these people obviously look like they represent the government in some way, right? They are all uniformed. They look like troops or military officers of some sort. And this person is holding up a flower, which we can sort of see as symbolizing peace. So they are trying to, stand up against whatever this military group here might be doing. And the last one, person versus what? So this seems like an example of person versus self, right? This child is very sad and is maybe needing to overcome an issue that is going on, right? Maybe a dropped ice cream cone or a lost balloon or something. Toddlers tend to make this reaction about a lot of things that happen, but that would be, that internal conflict where it's yourself dealing with your own emotions and problems. Okay, so that is an overview of conflict. The next thing we're going to talk about is mood. So in literature, mood is a literary element that evokes certain feelings or kind of vibes in a reader through their words and descriptions. So a mood could be eerie or peaceful or happy or sorrowful, nostalgic, upsetting. Okay, so it's basically the feeling that you get when you're reading. It's not something that the author ever comes out and directly says, but it's something that you infer and that you sense as you're reading. As always, if I'm going too fast, feel free to just pause the video, copy down what you need, and then restart once you are ready. Okay, so here's some practice. So you're going to determine the mood of each of these literary passages and just think, I think you might have to write one of them down or just think them to yourself. The river, reflecting the clear blue of the sky, glistened and sparkled as it flowed noiselessly on. So what kind of a mood is this? What does that make you feel? So hopefully you thought of an answer like happy, relaxed, peaceful, right? It just sounds like a very relaxing, calm type of environment. The next one says, the nitre, I said, see, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough. So what kind of a mood does this have? Does this still seem calm and peaceful and relaxing? So hopefully you have noticed that this passage has a different mood, right? This is maybe more of like a creepy or an eerie or a mysterious kind of a mood, right? You have the moss on the vaults. We have moisture trickling among the bones. Like that definitely sounds a little creepy. Okay. All right, let's look at the next one. It's strange that all this is still so clear to me now that summer has long since fled and time has had its way. What kind of a mood does this evoke in you as you read it? So you might think kind of nostalgic or like remembering, thinking back on prior events, maybe a little bit sad or wistful, right? We know that summer has long since fled, time has had its way. So it's definitely someone who's looking back on something after it has happened. So it should sort of feel like almost mournful or nostalgic for that sort of previous time. And here's another one. The sound was everywhere, but the wind had died, and it fell straight down in parallel paths, like ropes hanging from the sky. As I waited, I peered through the downpour, but no one came. What kind of a mood does this make you think of? Okay, so this might be kind of sad or lonely, right? You have the sound of rain. No one is coming. The rain is just pouring and pouring down, right? And this person is all alone. So maybe this is lonely, maybe this is a little sad, something like that. Okay, so that is mood. It's just that feeling that you get from the story or from a passage. Just a brief figurative language review. Just remember that similes are used to compare two unlike things using like or as. So the key here is that the two things are unlike, right? You can't compare, or if you just have the word like or just have the word as in a sentence, it doesn't automatically make it a simile, right? I could say, I like basketball. That's not a simile because I'm not comparing anything. So a couple of examples. Snow lay here and there in the patches in the hollow of the banks like a lady's gloves forgotten. So here we're comparing the way the snow is just sort of, you can kind of visualize it, right? When the snow really like starts to melt and there's just little pockets of it left. So it's comparing that to a lady's gloves forgotten. So maybe if someone drops a glove, it's just kind of sitting there in the grass among everything else. And that's kind of what the snow looks like, just these little tiny patches of snow. Another example, in the eastern sky, there was a yellow patch like a rug laid for the feet of the coming sun. So again, we're comparing the sky, this yellow patch of sky, to a rug. And it should help you visualize what the scene looks like. A metaphor then compares two things that are unrelated but share common characteristics. So when you have a metaphor, you do not use like or as, but more often you'll say that one thing is another thing or was another thing. So for example, the children were roses grown in concrete gardens, beautiful and forlorn. So we're comparing here the children to the roses. We're saying that they were roses. Okay, and how they share common characteristics is that they're both beautiful and forlorn. Forlorn kind of means sad. So you're comparing these two things that are not the same but have similar characteristics. Another example, this is from a song from the 80s, Love is a Battlefield. So you're comparing love to a battlefield, right, because there's similar characteristics. All right. Okay, so next I just want to give you a little bit of context about the story that we're going to be reading, which is called The Most Dangerous Game. So in this story, the main character is a big game hunter. And just to kind of give you a little context, it's pretty important that you understand what a big game hunter is. So most of us are probably familiar with people going hunting, maybe for deer, geese, right, pheasants, whatever it might be around in this area. And, some people do it for sport. Some people do it for the meats that they get. Different people have different reasons for hunting. In big game hunting, though, people pay lots and lots of money to get to go hunt exotic animals, right? So they'll go to Africa or Australia or Asia or different places, South America, and they will hunt, tigers and lions and elephants and jaguars and all of these sort of rare animals. So big game hunting was and still is a sport for basically the wealthiest of people because you have to be able to afford to go, go to the location first of all, buy the permits and different things, buy the guides, do all these things to be able to hunt these big animals. And it's pretty controversial today. Okay, so during the early 1900s, which is when this story takes place, big game hunting is something that really only men would be able to do, and they would spend a fortune traveling the world, hunting these different types of large exotic animals. Typically, animals killed by big game hunters are they are basically used as trophies versus, maybe like a deer hunter who is going to use the deer, for food or other things. Typically, a big game hunter is just looking for sort of the sport of it and the trophy of it, and that kind of becomes important during this story. So here's an example of a boat that they might take to go on one of these expeditions. Our story takes place, the beginning of it, on a yacht, very similar to this. So as you're reading, this is something that you can kind of visualize. This would be the type of yacht that they would be on their way to go hunt these exotic animals. In your notes, there's a place for you to leave your thoughts about big game hunting. What kind of person might a big game hunter be? And then sort of what does their hobby say about their views on life and a human's role in the world? So do they sort of see us, everyone as, animals as being equal to humans? Do they think that, there are levels where, humans are above the animals, that kind of thing? And these are just some pictures of big game hunters back in the time period that we're talking about. So this is actually Teddy Roosevelt, who was an American president. And then these are just some other big game hunters, just again, so that you can kind of visualize what these people might have looked like. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is your vocabulary words. So what I want you to do is go ahead and pause the video, and for each of the vocab words that are listed on your guided notes, I want you to make a prediction about what you think that word might mean based on the context in which it's given. So just go ahead and write down, there's a space for a prediction next to every word. Go ahead and jot down your ideas of what those words could mean. And then once you've done that, you can unpause the video and we will go over the correct definitions. Okay, so your first vocab word is tangible. So in the story, this is where this word is used. Sometimes I think evil is a tangible thing with wavelengths, just as sound and light have. So the correct definition is perceptible by the senses, especially the sense of touch. So this is something that you can feel, you can see. It's not imaginary, right? Tangible means that it's physically there in front of you. Again, when you're copying these down, feel free to pause the video, copy down the correct definition, and then unpause when you're ready to move on. The next word is vitality. With fresh vitality, he swam toward the sound. So the definition of vitality is an energetic style. So if someone is doing something with vitality, it means that they're energized and they're really going for it, right? It's not lazy, it's full of energy. The next word is cultivated. In a cultivated voice marked by a slight accent that gave it added precision and deliberateness. So cultivated means used to describe someone who is polite and civilized. So if someone speaks with a cultivated voice, then we can assume that they are a polite person, maybe upper class. They're very civilized type of person. Our next word is lacerate. Here's the quote from the story. It talks about the moss being lacerated. So to lacerate means to cut or tear irregularly. So you don't want to think of like a surgeon doing surgery is not lacerating, right? That's a different type of thing. This is like irregular. So like if you rip a piece of paper apart or something like that. Okay, so affable. He was finding the general a most thoughtful and affable host. Affable means full of warmth and friendliness. So if a person is affable, it means that they're very friendly. Next, we have droll. Droll is kind of a tricky one. So droll means comical in an odd or whimsical manner. So this is sort of like a dry sense of humor, or someone who, you know, you're kind of laughing, but you're laughing at them, right? Because they're sort of different or odd. And that's, so yeah, if you're describing someone as droll, you kind of think that they're strange or odd. Okay, the next word is invariably. So invariably means without change or in every case. So you can kind of think of invariably as meaning always. The next word is uncanny. Uncanny means surpassing the ordinary or normal. So uncanny almost means like kind of like almost like supernatural, or extraordinary, something like that. Precariously means in a manner affording no ease or reassurance, or another word for precariously would be dangerously. So I always think of like a tightrope walker. They are precariously balanced on the tightrope, right? So it's just sort of like, it's just barely hanging on. It's barely, balancing. The next word is debacle. So debacle means a sudden and complete disaster. So in the story, one of the characters says, after the debacle in Russia, I left the country. We don't really know what the debacle in Russia was, but it was some sort of huge disaster. And that is the end of our vocabulary words. We will continue to practice these, and you will be responsible for knowing them for the quiz that we have over this story. So make sure that you have these definitions copied down and you are going through them to memorize them.